Please go to the chat and tell us your name, tell us where you're joining from and the organization you represent. So today for session 7, we are going to discuss opportunities and potential for regional food trade expansion. And this conversation will be based on Ukraine Brief 4, which was authored by Usman Badjan and Sunday Ojo. Please head to the chat and you will be receiving links to Ukraine Brief 4 in English and French. Visit our portal to learn more about AKADEMIYA2063's Ukraine Briefs. And please, throughout this conversation, go to the Q&A. If you have any comments, questions, and observations, drop them in the Q&A and they will be brought to the floor during the conversation. And if you want to intervene live, please raise your hand and you will be given the floor. We are providing simultaneous interpretation in English and French as always, and we are live streaming on our YouTube channel. Now that the housekeeping is out of the way, please permit me welcome the moderator of today's session. He is the Regional Director for DAI Policy Link, Dr. Robert Uma. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Lai, for that introduction, and very happy to be here with you all in this latest edition of a very interesting series of webinars organized by AKADEMIYA2063 on the Ukraine Crisis Brief Series, and in particular focusing on opportunities for expansion in regional trade. Some of you may have been following this series of webinars. Will note that a lot of good work has been put in place by academia, studying the effects of the Ukraine crisis that started, I think it's now well over 300 days since that crisis started last year. And its effects have been felt across the world, but particularly so here in Africa, where many of us live and work, and particularly so in agriculture and also food security. And the transmission of those effects have had multiple and ongoing impacts on prices, on things like income, and ultimately on nutrition and food security at large. And so this series of discussions, which are based on very well researched and evidence-based papers, are providing great input into ultimately policy options that we as Africans should pursue in addressing the impacts of the Ukraine crisis. So for that, I want to thank the researchers at AKADEMIYA2063 for this work and for this latest edition of that discussion. More specifically, these questions around trade have now become front and center because the Ukraine crisis has had a larger than life, outsized effect on trade, whether it is access to things like fertilizer and so on, whether it's shipping lines, whether it's pricing across value chains. And an important consideration and question, which we then will handle in this particular discussion, is aren't there opportunities for Africans and African countries to trade more with each other? You know? And what are those opportunities like? Why should I, in Kenya, buy, for instance, rice grown in Taiwan when there's lots of rice grown next to in Tanzania? What are the issues here? So there's a lot of practical things here behind all the in-depth and very good analysis. There are questions and issues that we should ask ourselves. Why can't countries in this region trade with each other more as a means of building resilience against these global shocks? Why can't regions trade with other regions? ECOWAS and East Africa Community, or East Africa Community and SADC. What are the issues there? What are the comparative advantages? Are there real opportunities? And what should our policymakers do? So all of these questions are front and center in terms of this debate, and I would urge everyone to reflect and think deeply about them. For now, I have the pleasure of introducing our expert today, who will take us through some of these issues and questions. Dr. Sunday Ojo, who I have had the pleasure of interacting with and working with through some of the work we've done in the CADA process. And so we are very lucky to have him, very good researcher looking at this question. And Dr. Ojo was previously with IFPRI for many years, particularly supporting West Africa in terms of developing agricultural investment plans, providing technical assistance to countries. And previously, before that, I think working with Niger on the Millennium Challenge Cooperation work that IFPRI was leading there, and many other things, serving as an agriculture and trade policy advisor. Dr. Ojo holds a PhD in rural economics and previously an MA in geography and land use planning. And so thank you so much, Sunday Ojo, for being with us today. I'm going to cede the floor to you. Look forward to your presentation. And I will urge everybody to note any points of interest you can share with us on the chat, but later on we'll have a conversation once Sunday has made his presentation. Over to you.
Thank you, Robert. Can you hear me?
Very clearly. Go ahead.
I'm sharing my screen. So thank you very much for this introduction. I'm happy to follow the others on this series, and I'm particularly happy to come today after we have learned from the... Can you see my screen?
Yes, but you please go to the presentation itself. It seems to be showing that you're sharing your screen, but what we see is, yes, now go to the, yes, there you are. Great.
Thank you. So I was saying that the topic today comes after a couple of presentation webinars we had about the Ukraine crisis, and we've learned some things about the Ukraine crisis and the relationship with African countries that I would like to recall, because they provide some motivation for this results. So for this result, I have the opportunity to conduct with Dr. Ousmane Badiane. So it is on brief number 4. We learned from the different webinar we had before that Ukraine and Russia are big players in the trade of cereals, oilseeds, and vegetable oils, even in fertilizers. We have also learned that the crisis is such that we are experiencing global price rising and difficulties for transportation between these main players and African countries. We also know how many Africans are very dependent on import from those 2 countries that are in war. So in this situation where African countries may have some difficulties to source their foods, products from their traditional partners, Russia and Ukraine, a quick reaction that African countries could have is to see how they can source those products from within the region or from the neighboring regions. So this is why it is important to see how these crises can present opportunities for African traders, and to try to capture the size of the potential to rely on this crisis to expand regional food trade. This is the research we conducted, and to do that, we use very simple indicators, three indicators, very simple, but very informative in those opportunities we have, and the potential that will be saved and that will be exploited to expand intra-African food trade. So I will review those indicators very quickly. Then I will provide the finding from using those indicators, and the finding will let us see how the size of that potential, and to see also which products would be used to exploit that potential, and which countries are leading in terms of being able to seize that potential given their competitiveness. Then I will conclude. So the first indicator is called the trade overlap indicator. As the name says, and in fact, it's tried to measure the importance of overlapping flows between two partners. So we can see the formula that is used to measure the trade overlap indicator is the ratio, we can say the ratio of the minority flow to the total flow. The minority flow for a region is between export and import is the smaller one. So this gives us the proportion of total trade which is in the denominator that could be redirected to within the region partners instead of letting them being outside the region, because you see the variables are the export of the region, the import of the region to the rest of the world. So these trade overlap indicators show the proportion of the region's total trade that could be redirected and happen within the region. We worked at the very detailed level. The products are taken at the HSC level, because this indicator is very sensitive to the aggregation, and the result could be misleading if you work at another level. So the indicator varies between 0 for no overlapping trade, and 1 for a perfect overlap between import and exports. The second indicator is similar to the previous one. The only difference is that here you are analyzing the size of those overlap at the product level. The indicator is called the trade expansion indicator. So here at the product level, you can measure the size of flows overlapping in a country or in a region, and you can see that here it is measured as the ratio of the minority flow to the majority flow. That is, if you consider, for example, that in the region is, let's say, a net exporter, then in the numerator we have imports there and export in the denominator, and that will give you the proportion of the majority flow that could be redirected within the region. We worked at the regional level, considering Africa trade flows, and also the REX, ECOWAS, ECAS, COMESA, SADC, and AMU. So this indicator is in percentage, and it varies between 0 for no overlapping trade flow at the product level, and 100% for perfect overlap at that product level. So the third indicator Can you hear me?
Sunday, do you want me to share the PowerPoint, because we can't see the PowerPoint anymore?
Okay, please.
Yeah,
Share
if you
it.
stop sharing, I can share my screen.
Okay, please go.
Great.
I think I have a problem.
Can you see my screen?
The connection here. It's coming. Yes, I can see it. So
Okay.
please move it to, yeah, come again. The next one. Okay, so the third indicator is probably the one that is most known, is the revealed comparative advantage following Balassa formula. Here we use it after normalization. So this indicator gives you, it's obtained as the ratio of a product share in a country to that product share in world exports. So the share of that product in the country's total exports to the share of that product to world's total export. And it varies between 0 and infinity, but we know when it is bigger than 1, it reveals, it shows that the product K has the country E has a comparative advantage for the product K, and if it is smaller than 1, so there are a comparative disadvantage. If we use the normalized one because the RCA usually can give very big numbers, so it's not easy for reporting and presentation. So by this normalization, we have more smaller numbers that are easy to present. And in the normalization values, in the normalized values, the positive ones indicate comparative advantage, and the negative ones indicate comparative disadvantage. Next, please. Okay, so I'm going to present the results. So these are the results on the calculation of the trade overlap indicator at the continental level, that is considering the continental flows, but also at the regional levels. And you can see that the overlapping trade flows can be as big as something like 30% in COMESA and 40% in SADC. These two regions are where we have the highest degree of overlapping trade flows. ECAS is the region where those flows are not so big. And These show that in the agricultural trade, Africa show a lot of possibility of redirecting trade from some country, from outside Africa to within Africa to satisfy imports that are demanded by some countries and at the same time exports made by other countries. Next. But looking at the first result only may not be very satisfactory or helpful, because only one country can be at the origin at these overlapping trade flows. So to make sure to see that many countries are contributing to that overlapping trade flows, we compute the normalized trade overlap index by dividing these indicator at the country level by the indicator at the regional level. And here you can see that these normalized TOI are smaller than 1 for the majority of countries, which indicates that many countries are contributing to that overlapping trade flow. That is, as we suggested at the beginning, there exists in the region some countries importing while others are exporting the same products to and from outside the world, outside the region. So if those flows can be redirected to within regions partners, that will increase intra-African trade. Next, please. Now, as I said at the beginning, these computations are made at the product level, at the HSC digit level, but it's not easy to report on all those about something like 400 lines of products, but we can see the proportion of those products that fall in different range of trade expansion indicator value. So if you look at the computation for Africa-wide trade flows, you will see that for oilseeds and vegetable oils, you have these green bars that show that the TEI trade expansion indicator is bigger than 80%, knowing that 6% is the conventional level where we can conclude for the existence of a real scope for trade expansion. But you can see for oilseed and vegetable oil that for something like 60% of products, individual products, 60% of individual products have a trade expansion indicator bigger than 80%. And for vegetable oil, you see that something like 30% of individual products have a TEI value bigger than 80%. So this confirms what we saw broadly for Africa and agriculture as a whole. It confirms that there are many specific products that show these overlapping trade flows for the different regions within the different, for Africa as a whole. Next slide. Now, I bring the slide the chart we just saw. I bring it here for Africa. and have the same computation at the REX level, in order to compare how the trade expansion indicator values at the REX level compared to what it is at the continental level. And you can see, to go quickly, just look at the dark blue bars, the dark blue portions of the bars. You will see that, for example, for acres, the dark blues are very important, and they correspond to where the trade expansion indicator is smaller than 20%, very low. But, and for the other region, same for AMU, where we have this important number of products that have a trade expansion indicator between 0 and 20. And that's same for ECOWAS, and even for COMESA and SADC, the proportion of those products that have small TEI value are bigger than what we see at the Africa level. To conclude on this, we can see that trade expansion potential at the Africa level is bigger than what we can obtain at the regional level. And this confirms that as we have a possibility to redirect flows between countries, to redirect flows to intra-regional partners, it is also possible to redirect flows to other extra regional partners within Africa. Next, please. So I will finish with this slide. The question here is, if those products show the potential, which countries could play a role in exploiting those potential and expand intra-regional trade? We look at that by computing the revealed comparative advantage index, and this summarizes the top 3 countries that show the highest normalized SCA index by product category and region. And quickly, you will see that, for example, in ECOWAS, Guinea, Togo, and Mali would play the leading role in exploiting that potential to expand intra-regional trade of cereals. At this, for ECOWAS, for vegetable oil, you have Senegal, Gambia, and Benin that can play that role. So I will save time to not go through all these things, but we can see that there are differences between the list of 3 countries that show how the most competitive to seize that opportunities. It is not always the same list of countries you have for the different commodities, and that shows that there will be, if this is to be applied, there are a way to have a specialization of countries in specific commodities and avoid having all countries engaging in the same products. Next, please. So in this framework where we are looking at the impact of the crisis, the Russia-Ukraine crisis, we see that there are opportunities to be seized to replace those flows that normally come from outside Africa. And because we see that their productions and their trades, imports and exports that could be reorganized, redirected to cover parts, at least parts of those flows that have now some difficulties to reach Africa. And we have seen that SADC and COMESA countries will play the biggest role in that area. Thank you for attention. I hope your question will help clarify these questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Sunday Ojo, for the presentation. Very interesting. I was listening keenly, and I found it to be revealing in certain distinct ways. And in particular, if we go back to the questions that I asked at the beginning, I think using the example of cereals, oilseeds, and vegetable oils, that analysis has shown several things that are quite clear to me. One of those, and I will come to your questions shortly, and we can have a conversation about this, is that the trade overlap indicator shows us that we as African countries and African regions, I want to talk about regions as RECs, COMESA, ECAS, etc. We are importing and exporting agricultural commodities from outside of Africa that we could very easily import and export to other regions and countries in Africa. That's clear. The data shows that. Why aren't we doing that? That's the discussion we need to have. Second thing is, we go at the product level, and thank you, Sandy, for going to that level and showing some of the products that have got, when you look at you move from just simply looking at trade overlap at aggregate level, and you look at trade expansion indicator, and even trade overlap at country level, we see that a lot of products, commodities, if you like, are involved here. It's not just one or two, but it's also not just one or two countries. So there is evidence that multiple countries, many countries, have the opportunity to engage in this trade. If on aggregate we had this result, and then we looked at countries and found one or two countries only that were contributing to the overall result, we might have said something different. So again, that's an important point that I think is good for us to highlight. And then the last point that I would like to highlight before I open up for discussion is this question of comparative advantages. The revealed comparative advantage is shown by the last indicator that you had there, Sunday. And I like it because this is not open to speculation. It's not people saying, it's not politicians, it's what the data is showing us. And again, it is telling us quite clearly that the opportunities exist. And I like the idea that we also look at this information from a regional standpoint. I know we are using the RECs, ECAS, COMESA, SADC, and so on. And we see where the opportunities lie based on the revealed comparative advantages. And showing, therefore, the three countries that have the highest opportunity in each region based on revealed comparative advantage can help us, policymakers at regional level and at national level, to focus on the areas where they have the best opportunities. So I think there are very clear policy implications here. If anything, we say that every cloud has a silver lining. So this cloud of the Ukraine crisis may actually be showing African countries that there's great opportunity for looking inwards a little bit and doing trade with and amongst ourselves. Congratulations, and thank you, Sandy, for sharing this with us. I'd like to open up for discussion and hear from you, your thoughts, your comments, your questions. you can do so through the chat. And also, you can do the same by putting your hand up and asking your question or sharing your comment. Let's have a conversation. All voices count. Any and all thoughts are welcome. I'll just go to, I probably will start with the hands that are up, and then I will look at the questions in the chat box. So I will start with, I see Michael Colby. And if you do not mind, as you come off mute, please introduce yourself before sharing your question or comment. Go ahead, Michael.
I just, in the definitions of the indicators, I may be misunderstanding something, but it appeared to me like the definitions of E and M were identical. I'm misunderstanding something?
All right, we'll go back and take a look at that. That's in both the trade overlap indicator and the trade expansion indicator. That's where we have those two.
Yes.
So Sunday, you can take a look at that as we get other questions on board. Thanks for drawing our attention. That could be an error. Then I will go to Salif, I believe. Salif, also, if you could introduce yourself and ask your question. So Salif.
Good morning or good afternoon. I'm Salif So. I was former technical assistant at ECOWAS for resilience and food security and nutrition. Actually, I'm just participating to follow up as I participated before on those topics on Academia webinar. Thank you. Today, I don't have any specification.
Thank you for introducing yourself, Salif. I don't mind that. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I will move to, I believe it's William Akiwumi. William, please introduce yourself and ask your question.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is William Akiwumi here. I'm the Senior Agriculture Advisor for the USAID Africa Bureau. I want to look beyond the numbers to look at the policy implications for production, on the continent. So looking at the revealed competitive advantage indices, we see some countries have opportunities for trade expansion within certain product groups. What is behind this? What are the policies that these countries are pursuing that's making this possible? Is it trade liberalization? What are the, I don't know if the research looked beyond the numbers. Thank you.
Thanks. That's a great question. Maybe Sunday will have some thoughts on it, and there are also other experts here that I would like to urge them to feel free to share their thoughts as well, because that's where we should be going. What's it that's making some countries much more competitive and have a comparative advantage versus others? And that's we could learn from that. Thanks for that, William. Yed. I'll take Yed and Fatima, then we'll have some response and we can do another round. Yed Mbaye, please.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Moderator.
Let me start with Yed and then I'll come to you, Fatima.
Okay, I thought, sorry for that.
No worries. Yed, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm not Yed, I'm Mbaye.
Mbaye Yad, I'm sorry. This is Africa.
Mbaye.
We have very interesting names, and I'm particular because I actually know you're Mbaye Yad. I've met you many times. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much, Robert. Yeah, I have a similar question which my predecessor raised. Maybe Sunday, do we have the explanation why oilseeds and vegetable oils have more are different from cereals, and that expansion is more is probably better to get in Southern Africa than in West Africa. What is the reason? What are we doing? What are in West Africa? What are we doing false or not good? so that we cannot expand our regional trade. Thank you.
Thanks, Bayad. Let me finish this round with Fatima. Now it's your turn.
Yeah, thank you again, Mr. Moderator. My name is Fatima Karim, and I'm a senior scientist at AKADEMIYA2063. My question is like this. In your analysis Sunday, you mentioned that Africa has maybe some REC, especially the COMESA and SADC REC, they have very high potential in satisfying extra Africa trade. And in particular, we see that for oilseed and vegetable oils, they have very high reveal comparative advantages in those in the production of these commodities. And I was wondering that since they have these high potentials, they could respond to the supply shortages during the crisis. But what we saw during the war, or what I see seeing, is that this was not so. Although in the short run, it's very difficult to organize the market and to meet the existing shortages. So this makes me to ponder on some issues like, why is the world not focusing on African countries to buffer the shocks, especially the shocks in vegetable oils? What roles do non-tariff barriers and external trade policies of the importing countries in terms of trade agreements with Africa, how do they determine this, as in for them not shifting the focus on African countries? More importantly, what role do you think AfCFTA has to play to lead countries, particularly these countries that we see that have very high trade potentials and high comparative advantage? What role do you think AfCFTA has to lead these countries to the market for them to expand intra-African trade? Thank you. Over to you.
Yes, thought-provoking. Thank you so much, Fatima. I think these are great questions. They are the kind of questions that if we crack, we might be able to sort out some of the challenging issues. That last question, why is it that, yes, there's this potential, but it's just potential? I know that one of my mentors used to say that you can't eat potential. You can talk about it, but you can't really do anything with it unless you realize it. How come when the Ukraine crisis happened, things didn't shift to Africa, where this potential is apparently great? And what's the role of the African Continental Free Trade Area agreements in facilitating this better and greater and much deeper trade and integration that we are all looking forward to? So I'd like to invite Sunday to react to some of these points with his thoughts and responses, and then we'll take another round. So just hold your horses, we'll come back and get more feedback from you. Sunday, if you could quickly touch on these issues.
Thank you, Robert. So let me take the question in the reverse order. As Fatima had a very nice question that made me reflect some time when I was looking to those results. So in fact, when you see those results, you just ask yourself why we do not organize trade in that way. But it is not possible to organize trade. It is only possible to facilitate trade, to create the conditions that will let things go the way is more profitable to everyone. So I think in your question, Fatima, you touched to the issues. It is about policy. It is about tariffs, non-tariff barriers. It's about a lot of things that makes that actually we are in a world which is different from the world of our analysis. In computing these indicators, you assume you are in a frictionless world. There's no friction. It is possible to redirect flows as we wish. No, the world is a bit more complicated than what is assumed in these indicators. But these indicators show us what we could do if we were able to have good policies and facilitate trade to go that way. So, and I hope the AFCFTA will be well implemented to the point that we'll be able to remove a lot of non-trade barriers that within the regions, even though we have made efforts to reduce tariff barriers for these regional trade organizations, there remain a lot of much of non-tariff barriers which we should expect the AFCFTA will help us to remove. So, coming to Mbai's question, yes, when I saw the result, I also take another look to the computation and to the data, and I saw that, in fact, you know, these indicators are about two-way trades. So for products that do not show a lot of a big occurrence of two-way trades, you will have you won't have a good size of overlap. So for cereals, many African countries used to import a lot of cereals, but you don't see you don't see African countries that are exporting cereals outside Africa. So you can see the flows in one sense, but you don't see it in one direction, but you don't see it very much in the other direction for cereals. But for oilseeds and vegetable oils, you take the example of Senegal, the example of other countries that produce oilseed products, that you know that there we have exports, a lot of export, and at the same time, African countries are engaged in a lot of imports of those products. This is why overlapping trade flows are bigger there. But for cereals, you don't see much export of cereals outside Africa. This is how I see the difference of the result between cereals and oils and vegetable oils. The question related to the difference in the revealing comparative advantage also made me, when I saw the result, I look again to try to understand why. And in fact, this indicator, everyone knows that it doesn't really reflect an advantage, a natural advantage, but it can reveal policies and interventions that are made in the countries that help reveal that advantage. So the differences may be, yes, they can be in the natural endowments of countries. Factor endowment has they suggest when proposing that indicator, but actually it's not only the factor endowment that explain the difference in resource endowment that explain the difference in RCAs, but it could also be policies and other many interventions that the government used to to have, and that change the direction of those comparisons. I didn't get very clearly the question about the formulas. Robert, can you, that is the first information.
Yes, I have actually looked at it. It is, if you go to the presentation, you can take a look at that as we get more input. It's just to alert you that, and I definitely know that this is probably just an error because I know what this formula should look like. But in any event, it's not the formula itself, but where you have the description of the meanings of the variables. Under the formula, you describe the variables E and M, IK, to represent the countries and so on. But the description of I is global export of agricultural product K, I is global export of agricultural product K. It's repeated for both E and M. One should be export and one is import, I guess. So you will take a look at that, right?
That's an error. The second is an import.
Yeah, I kind of guessed that, knew that, okay. But it's nevertheless an error, and I thank I think it's Michael who alerted us to that.
Yes,
well, let's see if we can take well, maybe I don't have that much time for that, but let me look at the.
Robert,
yes.
Sorry, there was a hand from Pauline Simmons. I accidentally lowered it.
Oh, okay. Pauline, please.
Yes, thank you so much.
And apologies for lowering your hand forcefully.
No problem at all. Thank you so much. I'm running to another meeting, so I just put my question in the comment section. And so I'll just read it out. I said, reliable, timely, and accurate agricultural data and market information are needed to foster efficient functioning of agricultural markets and effective policies. Unfortunately, we all know that many African ministries of agriculture don't have easily available and shareable data for trade and policies. How do we build capacities of these institutions to generate basic data that you all can use for the types of analysis that you conduct? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pauline. Great point. We need to exercise our minds on this one because without good data, we are basically walking and acting blind. I'm sure that the researchers on this call, starting with Dr. Sunday Ojo, will agree with you. Thanks for that point, and thanks for sticking with us up to this point. I really appreciate that. I also see Godwin Abu's hand up, so I'll give him the last chance to make a comment, and then we can begin to wrap up. Godwin, please introduce yourself and then ask your question.
My name is Professor Godwin Abu from the University of Agriculture in Makurdi here in Nigeria. I want to support the last speaker's position on why African countries are importing cereals. You know, our population is growing. Population is a very critical factor, and productivity for almost all cereal crops in my own part of Africa here in Nigeria is declining. Example, rice, for instance. At farmers level, we are getting 1.2 to 2 tons per hectare. Whereas in places like Vietnam, they are getting 24 tons per hectare. And until we put in policies to meet smallholder farmers to double the productivity, one advantage that Africa has at the moment is that yield differentials. The productivity is very low. So for our free trade to work, we must first leverage on that opportunity to first double yields at farmers level. And until we put in place policies to do that, we are going to, for a long time, our self-sufficiency will be at the level of potential. Then also the use of very harmful chemicals. Because of at farm level, there's a lot of shortage in labor supply. Consequently, farmers now are using chemicals to control weeds, and a lot of those chemicals are harmful. especially that some of them too are taken up in the tissues of plants like vegetables that are almost consumed on. So this one again too constitute a very big threat and problem, to the extent that if we now subject this food to any analysis, it cannot even cross a local market, let alone going for any international trade. So if we put in place these policies to first ensure food safety, then to most importantly, to improve or double productivity at farmers level. Yeah, I think if we do that, then we can talk of exporting cereals. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof, for your comment and also for your passion. I completely agree with you. We'd like to be wrapping up because we're going to run out of time. But let me just say that I recognize all the questions of the chat box. Thank you, Richard Mugo, for your comments. The issue of insecurity and conflict is a big one. And I see that you had another question about the EAC. I believe we aggregated at COMESA level, but should be able to get data to you and information disaggregated at EAC and what's happening there. Thanks for that. There are questions from various people. I see Hilda asking about how does South Africa rank in terms of the indicator study. Maybe some of this wasn't particularly, focused on specific countries. But I would urge everybody to go into the documentation on AKADEMIYA2063 website and look at the information. There's a series of studies there that answer a lot of these questions and provide more info. In concluding, let me just say that I agree with, perhaps it's William's question, I believe it was William, saying that the data is telling us the reality. It's time to focus on the policies that will help us achieve this potential. And with that, I probably should hand over back to Lai. I see you've come off mute, perhaps because of time. We need another half hour perhaps to get to all these issues, I guess. But thanks so much, and thank you, Sunday Ojo, for being here and for presenting and responding to our questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Robert, and a virtual round of applause to our moderator, Regional Director, Dye Policy Link, Dr. Robert Omer, and a special thank you to Dr. Sunday Ojo, Deputy Director, Operational Support at AKADEMIYA2063 for this presentation. And thank you to all the attendees. The interactions today were wonderful. Please keep the questions coming. We will continue to have these conversations, and do not hesitate to reach out to us, the Communications Department, or to the scientists should you need any additional information. We have come to the end of session 7 of the Ukraine Crisis webinar series. Please go to the chat box and click the link to brief 4. Visit our portal at AKADEMIYA2063.org, where we have 19 Ukraine briefs and counting published to date. Thank you for joining us, and do not miss another exciting session. Same time next week, we will be hosting session 8 on the theme transmission of global price shocks to local commodity markets in Rwanda, with a presentation from Dr. Paul Guthiga, Senior Scientist at AKADEMIYA2063. And the session will be moderated by Dr. Hamadi Diop, Senior Technical Advisor to the ALDA Directorate of Program Innovation and Planning on Food Systems. Please go to our slide share as well. The link has been shared in the chat, where you're going to have access to all the PowerPoints presented during this webinar series. And of course, follow us on Twitter at AKADEMIYA2063.org. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you again to our moderator and our speaker, and see you next week. Bye.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Bye. Yes. Yes.